Hi everyone. So today we're going to talk about what happens when I not only throw a fraction exponent at you, but a negative fraction exponent. Now you've already worked with negatives, so you know what they do, but people tend to get a little freaked out when I put the negatives with a fraction. They kind of lose sight of what that negative is supposed to do. So first thing I want to do, this by the way is on it's the very last slide of the notes that we did in class yesterday. So the complex rational exponents, this will be the last part of that. I'm going to run through these ones over here on the left side, which are really just a review of the types of problems we've already done. And then if you notice, the ones over here on the right side are all exactly the same, except I've made the fraction negative up top. And I just want to talk about what the difference is there. Okay, so 27 to the 1/3 power. Remember, that means I want to break 27 into 3 equal factors. So if I throw together a factor tree here, I find that 27 breaks into 3 threes. So 27 to the 1/3 is just equal to 3. Now remember, for this next one, something like 64 to the 4/3, first thing I want to do is split up that fraction. So I'm going to make it 64 to the 1/3 and then raise that whole thing to the power of 4. So I'm just giving myself a little more room for a factor tree here. When I do a factor tree for 64, I might start with 8 and 8, and then 2 and 4, 2 and 4, and then each of the 4s can become a 2 and a 2. So ultimately, no matter how you did your factor tree, you should come down to 6 different 2s. Okay? Now, the problem here is I don't want to break my 64 into 6 pieces. I want to break it into 3 pieces. Okay, so I need to think about how I can put those factors back together so that I only have 3 groups instead of 6, because right now I've broken this into 6 different pieces, and I only want 3 pieces. So to do that, I would put these together, and these together, and these together. Okay, so I can take 6 2's and put them in 3 groups by putting 2 2's together, which means I really have 4 times 4 times 4. So 64 to the 1/3 power is just 4. So now over here I just turned this into a 4, and then I'm going to go 4 to the 4th power, which is 256. So my answer there would be 256. Okay, and then for that last one, 49 over 25 to the 3/2 power, I'm going to work this one down below here. I would split up that fraction just like I did before. I would get rid of that 3 and make this a 1/2, and then put the 3 on the outside. And I'm going to put that on each number individually. So I'm going to say 49 to the 1/2 to the power of 3, and 25 to the 1/2 to the power of 3. These ones I'm hoping you can do without a factor tree. If you needed to do a factor tree for 49, you certainly could. But remember, a power of 1/2, you're really just splitting into 2 equal factors. So you're thinking, what times what makes 49? Well, that would be 7 times 7. And then I still have a 3 up there. On the bottom, 25 to the 1/2 is 5. So I have 5 to the 3rd power. And let's see, 7 to the 3rd power is 343. And 5 to the 3rd power is 125. So final answer on that one is 343 over 125. Let's see if I can just slide that right up there next to the problem. Okay? Okay, so now that you've seen that, I want to run through an example of what happens when you have a negative exponent. Let me just slide this whole thing back down. That didn't work like I wanted it to. So before I go to those examples on the right side of the page, I just want to run through one problem that has a negative in it so you can see how I attempt it and how I break it down. And then we'll go back and do those other ones. So if you want to write this down, you can. If you want to just follow along and then just make sure to write the other ones down, that's fine too. So let's say I give you, and I'm going to go kind of easy on you here, 8 to the power of -4 over 3. Well, remember when we have fractions like this, we kind of start by breaking that fraction apart. So I would rewrite this as 8 to the 1/3 raised to the power of 4. Now think to yourself, what piece am I still missing? Because I really need a negative 4/3. If I put these back together, I'm still missing a piece. What I'm missing is the negative. So now what I'm going to do is just put a -1 on the outside of all of that. And I'll show you how to deal with that in just a minute. But that's how I would now take my fraction and split it up. Just like we did before, I would make it 1/3 and 4. And then because it's negative, put a -1 out here. Okay, so for 8 to the 1/3, if I do a factor tree for 8, I get 2 and 4 and 2 and 2. So 8 to the 1/3 is just equal to 2. So now I have 2 to the power of 4 to the power of -1. Okay? Well, 2 to the power of 4, that's 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 is 16. So now I have 16 to the power of -1. Okay, and this is the part that people forget about. Remember, a negative exponent does not make your answer negative. So I would not say -16 here. I would say 1/16. So remember, a negative exponent makes your answer move down to the bottom of the fraction. So everything works the same all the way through here, and then when you get to this very last step, all you're doing is flipping your answer over and making it a fraction. Notice nothing in my answer is negative. No negative exponents, no negative numbers. So now let's go back to those other examples we just did. So all those scribbles you see over on the left, that was the work that we had already done on the left. Now let's look at the right. The right is really similar, except now I have negatives. So for example, this first one, I would break down by saying, I just want to darken this up a little bit. I would say, well, this is really like 27 to the 1/3 to the power of -1. Well, 27 to the 1/3 we figured out back here was 3. So if you don't remember how to do that part of it, you can look back over here on the left. So this would be 3 to the power of -1, which is just 1/3. So flip your answer at the end. Look at the difference between this and this. Okay, the only real difference is I took it and flipped it and made it a reciprocal. Okay, for 64, and I'm not going to redo the factor tree here, but I would rewrite this exponent as, I forgot all that junk at the bottom needs to move. I would rewrite this exponent as 64 to the 1/3 to the power of 4 to the power of -1. Okay? Again, taking that negative 4/3 apart and really kind of splitting it into 3 different pieces. Well, back here we figured out that 64 to the 1/3 was equal to 4. Okay, so I'm going to say 4 to the power of 4 to the power of -1. Well, 4 to the 4th is 256 to the power of -1. And so my final answer would be 1/256. Again, looking at the difference between this answer and this answer, the only thing that you're doing differently now is you're flipping your answer at the end. Okay, so let's think about, without even having to write out all that work, I'm just going to, let's see. This one's hard to fit in there. My answer for this one originally came out to 343 over 125. Can you figure out what would happen with a negative? A negative would take this whole fraction and flip it over. So I would work through it exactly how I did down here. This is all hiding from me. Let's see. Okay. I would split it up exactly like this, except I would also put powers of -1 on the outside. Okay. So this would come out to be, I'll just put it down here at the bottom. Again, 7 to the 3rd. Move it over a little bit. 7 to the 3rd over 5 to the 3rd but we'd have those negative 1s sitting out there. Sorry, I'm making this very sloppy. And all those negative 1s are going to do is take this answer and move it to the bottom and take this answer and move it to the top. Okay, so you would get, just like before, 343, but with a negative 1, and 125 with a negative 1, which again is going to make these flip-flop. So your final answer here, and I do apologize that I'm running short on space and making a big mess of my paper here, but final answer for this would end up being 125 over 343. Okay, so that negative just took my answer from here and reversed it, made it flip over. Okay, so really, really important that you get good at writing these out separately like this. Okay, the exponent, splitting them apart, because that gives you your direction. That tells you do this, now do this, now do this. Okay? All right, assignment for tonight. In your packet, you will find Lesson Master 7-8B. Just like the other two pages, you are only doing the front. And I will tell you that I would like to see numbers 1 through 8 done by hand. Okay, which means I should see factor trees, I should see those split up exponents, I should see evidence that you're working through them, mostly without a calculator. I mean, maybe using your calculator to do like 5 to the 7th power or something like that, but I should be able to see that you've worked through them by hand. The rest of the page, calculator is fair game. And I think there was one that had a weird exponent. Let me check that real quick. Yep. Number 4 on your paper says 81 to the power of negative 0.75. Well, negative 0.75 is the same as negative 3/4, so I would make it so this problem said 81 to the power of negative 3/4. And then you should be good to go on that problem. Okay? All right, we will go over this and 7-7 in class tomorrow and then plan on a quiz Friday.